Welcome back, everyone. So now what I want to talk to you about before we start rendering a little bit of practice activity, basically, I want to show you kind of the thought process that goes behind it. So bear with me with my pretty little cheesy diagram here, but hopefully this will help you understand the thought process before jumping into the rendering stage. So for instance, as we look at this diagram on the left, we'll just call it number 1. And basically it's just a straight on shot, and then you got number 2, which is a top view. Okay, so it's the same sphere or circle at this point, but it's going to be a sphere. So what I want you to think about is we have this X right in the front. This is where our line of sight, field of view, our focal point, lots of ways to kind of interpret that, but this is where our eye level is, and that's why there's a horizon line right here. So a lot of this works off basic perspective. Pretty much everything you're going to draw works off basic perspective. So we're looking there. Now our light source, we'll say it's a sun, but it could be a light bulb, it could be anything. Just keep in mind when you are doing something like a sun, you typically are going to get more bounce light because the sun is so ambient and it's so powerful. So you are going to get more bounce light from a sunlight versus a light bulb, but light bounces off of everything. So as it comes down and it hits this area, you see these dotted lines, it catches the edges based upon perspective, but you want to also be aware that if the light source is bright enough, it does bounce off a ground plane and hit the sides and things like that. But we're not going to worry too much about that. I just want you to understand that light is ambient in nature and pretty much bounces off of everything, affects everything in the scene. So what we have here is, we're trying to define where the placement of this light source is. So we could say it looks like it's beside or slightly behind the circle or sphere. And then from the top view, you can see it is behind it. So here's our camera or our, person or whoever, our person looking at the object. There's that little X right on the front of it. And you see over here that the light source is behind it. And again, perspectively, it would affect this area. So if you were to think about this in a shape of shadow or a definitive line of light and dark, you could make the argument that the shape would be something like that. And you would get this moon-like effect. Now, the more this sun or light bulb or whatever passes over the object in this way, so it kind of circles around it, the more this shape is going to turn from this to this. Okay, so it's just the relationship of where the light source is. So again, based on the top view and the front view, we can pretty much discern that it's something like this. Okay, so light is going to wrap around, but at a certain point, it's going to gradate, or there's going to be a gradient fade, and it's going to fade off, and it's going to lose intensity. Now, if this is a very specular object, like a chrome, ball or sphere, then it's going to be very abrupt or a lot more abrupt. But if it's something that's disperses light, like fabric, like pretty much anything but a really hard surface, is going to, it's going to have a gradation. And that's what we're going to do as we start to ink this example. We're going to go more of a gradient effect, something that has a dispersed light. But again, I want you to just see this in a diagram and kind of, think about this. You should always be very aware of where your light source is, what you want to have an idea going into this concept, because if not, if you're just sitting here and, you just start doodling whatever comes to mind over top, then, maybe you get something cool, maybe you don't, maybe you learn, maybe you don't learn as much as you could, but going in with a focal point, with an idea, and definitely always know where your light source is, where your line of sight is, where the viewer is. All those things are going to kind of matter. So, ground plane, things like that. So just keep in mind, this is our ground plane right here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ink one of these circles, and we're going to take a 2D circle and turn it into a sphere by adding rendering. So with that, let's move on to our next lesson and jump on in.